And good evening. I'm Jonathan Higgins,
I'm Rich Carlson.
and we are the Scanner Guys. And welcome to the show this evening. We have a great show underway for you tonight. We're talking about unusual uses for scanners like intercoms, audio feeds, and more. So we're looking outside of the box. We're looking for things that typically you're not going to use the scanner on a daily basis. Most people think public safety, police, fire, and EMS, and all that. Tonight, we're going to take a look at a little bit different point of view with scanners. Welcome, everyone, to the broadcast tonight. I see there's a lot of check-ins this evening. Welcome to the show. We are excited to have you here. Let's go through a couple of slides, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. So hold on. All right, make sure you support the Scanner Guys show by visiting our website. You can sign up for our newsletter, which we try to send one once a month. And then we don't always get around to doing it all the time, so we don't spam your mailbox. And make sure you shop our store. We have all types of merchandise there, including hoodies and T-shirts, masks, a really nice tote bag, stickers, a couple of other items such as a travel mug, and a few other t-shirts out there as well. So make sure you do that. Check out the website, thescannerguyshow.com. Follow, like, and subscribe to the Scanner Guys as well at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at the Scanner Guys. All right, so tonight's presentation, we're looking for unusual uses for scanners, intercoms, pagers, audio feeds, and more. We've got a couple of scanners featured on tonight's slide, the 125AT, the 15X, and even the 1040. So those are a couple of familiar scanners to some of you. So let's take a look at the next slide here. All right, so a lot of fire departments will use their system as an intercom inside the department. A lot of times they'll use a scanner to be able to do that and not dedicate a radio to doing that. Like typically inside the firehouse, I'll have a couple of speakers set up.
Yep.
So if the firemen are in or fire people, I should say, are in the sleeping quarters, or they're down in the garage working on the trucks, there's a couple of speakers in a couple of different spots. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll connect up a scanner up to that. A lot of times these radios, as we've had Dale Osborne say, a lot of these radios are anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000, depending on how many bells and whistles they have.
And even if they're using standard conventional frequencies, it's still a lot cheaper to put a scanner in there to monitor like the fire ground channels or the mutual aid channels and stuff than to have a bunch of two-way radios or more expensive receivers. Scanners work just fine for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, typically some fire departments actually have, 3 to 4 portable radios in the rig. The rig radios in there as well. I mean, I've heard a lot of fire departments. I remember when I lived in Attleboro, Massachusetts, a lot of the rigs actually had some portable radios in there along with the mobile radios. So
yeah,
they've already invested a ton of money into radios. And yeah, scanners can be relatively expensive depending on the model. I mean, the SDSs, you're at $650 to $700. They're expensive alone, but just imagine, paying, Motorola prices for these radios anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. So anytime a department's able to do this, it's great.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had scanners on our command vehicles, in our EOC, and even in the little office at the fire station, not only for the fire ground channels and such, but like Joe mentioned, for the other agencies in the area that may not be on your channel. So, there's a lot of uses for those in there. And also, a lot of fire departments will use them as a backup to their dispatch system. Common practice is to have at least 2 ways to alert your firehouse. And oftentimes it's over a phone line or over a radio pager or something. You have to have a backup in case something goes wrong. And a scanner works as a backup.
It certainly does. I mean, this is certainly one of the applications is an intercom system, for this particular particular instance. We've talked about this quite a bit. Broadcastify streams. Now, a lot of people frown upon it because they feel like a lot of public safety agencies go to encryption when they're being broadcast over the World Wide Web. But that's not the only thing that you can broadcast over Broadcastify streams. Did you know there's streams available for aviation, railroads, amateur radio, maritime, and even NOAA weather radio? There's tons of
Yeah.
feeds listed on Broadcastify. It's super, well, it's not super simple, but it's pretty simple to do.
Yeah.
We would recommend something like a 15X or a 996 with that record jack.
Yeah, that record jack makes it so much easier.
Yeah, it certainly does, to be able to connect up the audio through that record jack, because it's one steady volume on there. Versus, if you hit the knob and you're using the external speaker jack, that's going to fluctuate quite a bit, because if you adjust that knob or turn it down or turn it up, it's going to create issues. The other benefit of using the record jack is if you're still using your scanner that you're using for your feed as your everyday radio, you can adjust that volume knob. You can turn it up and be able to listen to that speaker independent from the recording. So the record jack basically is feeding out one steady audio to the computer, and then that's independent from the speaker.
Yeah, and that it just works so much better than to have it hooked up to the external speaker jack or the headphone jack. It's ideal for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of you probably do have like some of these older radios kicking around, like an older T radio, let's say a 15T or a 996 or any of those particular models.
Yeah, some of the even older scanners, like the 2004, 2005 types scanners, had record jacks on them. So even those would work well for a lot of these services, especially aviation.
Yeah, and these are great little radios to be able to do that. I can't stress enough. I would love to see more railroad feeds out there, especially if you're living in an area where it's very busy radio transmission wise. You have a yard or a junction point where there's tons of communication. It's a great feed to be able to put up there. And the benefits of doing a Broadcastify feed, you do have some perks, becoming a member that, you don't have to pay a subscription. That's a benefit. It's a trade-off, essentially. You're providing a scanner feed. But a couple of things keeping that in mind. You want a reliable internet connection.
Yep.
You probably want an inexpensive computer that's just used for this feed. And it doesn't need to be anything too fancy. It can be an older operating system. It just needs to be stable and be able to operate the software that Radio Reference provides. And it's typically on a Windows-based machine. So if you got an older Windows machine, you should be able to do that as well. But yeah, I mean, the great thing about it, you're able to listen to your scanner pretty much anywhere. You can download Broadcastify. Actually has its own official app, which you can download on Android phones or Apple phones. It's a really good app. I would definitely recommend taking a look at that. And if you're interested in some of these other things, look at some of those other feeds. You may find some interest in monitoring some of these other things other than public safety.
And the software to do it is very easy to install and very easy to set up. And the procedure to get a Broadcastify stream is pretty straightforward. You put the application in on their website. You tell them what you're going to listen to, what frequencies and such. And once it gets approved, they give you a number, a code number, a stream number, and you enter that number into that software. And when you get that software set up, it'll tell you that it's working properly, and off you go. It's not that hard to do.
You must be using a different software for streaming, because the one that I was using on Radio Reference, basically you log in using your username and password, and then as soon as that stream's approved, it'll list it as a pull down on the software. So there may be
that could have been another one. The last time I had a stream was probably close to 10 years ago.
Yeah, so it's it actually made it a little bit more simpler now, where you just use your username and password for Radio Reference, and then that'll appear in the pull down as an option. I've had, when I was in Massachusetts, I actually had a couple of different feeds on Radio Reference.
Yeah.
So I made sure when I rebooted the computer and connected up, I made sure that I connected the right scanner to the right feed. because you could have multiple feeds there.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely take advantage of that. If you haven't already, download the Broadcastify app. Take a look at it. I mean, there's some cool stuff in there for aviation, railroad, maritime, and
ham radio. Yeah.
Ham radio, all that stuff, all good stuff there. Then, of course, for instance, if there's ever a breaking news event across the country, take a look to see if there is a feed for that local department that's handling that situation.
You betcha.
All right, tone out. We've talked about this at length, and we've talked about it during some of our shows. A lot of times, you may be a volunteer firefighter, or you may want to be tipped off when there's a big event occurring. Let's say, for example, you're watching TV and you don't want to hear all the chatter all the time from the scanner. So you may put your radio on fire, tone out. What that allows your radio to do is just monitor those toned out incidents, and you'll be able to hear it on the scanner. And then let's say if it's a large enough incident, you're like, oh, I may want to turn the scanner on fully and be able to monitor the fireground channel. Yeah. So many of you remember the Pletron Pagers. This is almost the same type of thing, but turning your scanner into a Pletron Pager, essentially. So you're able to monitor those tone outs by some simple programming, which we've covered in a past show.
Yeah.
That allows you to be able to have your radio in standby. As soon as they tone out, those radio transmissions will go over. And you can also set it to various, if your department has like an all call or an EMS call or a fire call, if you've got the tone codes, you'll be able to set it to that as well.
Yeah, and if you don't have the tone codes, they're actually pretty easy to get as long as you have a BCT 15 or a 996 type scanner. Just set, when you set the tones up, set both the A tone and the B tone to 0. And when you're on the particular frequency, when it hears a set of tones, it'll decode those tones and show you what they are on the screen of your scanner for a few seconds. Jot those down and listen to the call, and you can usually figure out pretty quickly if that's an all call, if it's a fire call, or whether it's a station call or an EMS call. And once you get those figured out, you can get those programmed into your radio. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take much.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely, I've done that on a 536. It's pretty awesome, being able to just monitor a particular town. Unfortunately, many areas have switched over to regional dispatching. So a lot of times you really got to pay attention to what the fire calls that are going out. And they will typically use, with trunk systems, they will use a conventional channel to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So you want to program in that particular conventional channel. Like, for instance, I'm just north of downtown Cincinnati in Hamilton County. There's a couple of dispatches, a west side, an east side, and a central side. So a lot of times I really got to be paying attention when the tone out goes out. I could actually dedicate, which I'm in the process of doing, is dedicating a scanner just to the tone out. And then the only time that radio is going to turn on is when it's, for the particular community that I'm in Cincinnati. So in Cincinnati, it's a bunch of different, I don't know if you call it like villages or
townships,
townships or as such. But yeah, I mean, it's basically, so I basically have it on here. So I'm able to listen to that particular township. So when that comes on and I say, oh, this may be interesting, and they'll also say what fireground channel they're using.
Yeah. Then
I can have a radio that's set with all the fireground channels and just use the silver scroll knob and scroll to that fireground talk group. So
yeah, the fire tone out is a fascinating use for these scanners, and it's great that the unit and scanners have that.
Yeah, so definitely take advantage of that. We've done whole shows on this. We may do another show in the fall if you guys would like, about fire tone out. So that's another great topic that we can talk about even more in detail. But let's continue on. All right. So monitoring, public monitoring systems.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, some places actually have a scanner hooked up for the public to hear.
Yeah.
Very much like the example that we gave of the fire station, where the firefighters are basically listening while they're working at the fire
Mhm.
station. Same type of thing, but this is a little bit different. Like a airport viewing area for people that are interested in watching planes, a rail fanning pavilion. A lot of times they'll have a speaker somewhere, and that typically is connected to a scanner. They're
Mhm.
not they're not going to really invest into a two-way radio. Yet again, those are pretty expensive. And one of those common radios that are used to the standby on a single channel, and it's a radio that does not get a lot of attention, is the
Yeah.
BC 355N.
Yeah. It's a cheap $100 scanner, but for those particular purposes, it works great. You can program a couple of the aviation channels or the railroad channels, depending on where you're at, and leave it go. And you're not investing a whole boatload of money on a big, expensive digital scanner. There's no need. This will do the job just fine.
Yeah, and it also is, unlike a portable radio, it's small and compact, so it
Hmm.
doesn't take much of a footprint, and also it's powered by electricity, and you're
Yep.
not having to worry about batteries. This radio, we don't talk about it a lot, but it does have a small footprint. It's a bit of a pain to program.
Yeah.
Basically, what you're doing is you're going into a programming mode, and then you're scrolling through the frequency list of, all the frequencies essentially, and then you're
Yep.
storing one by one,
Yeah.
so it's not something you want to program hundreds of channels in. Like Rich said, an airport's going to be using a handful of channels. A
Yeah.
railroad's going to be using maybe one or two channels. So
Yeah.
it's not something too crazy to program with one of these
Yeah.
radios.
And this is a one of those program it and forget it type
Yep.
things.
Unless there's a frequency change.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when you go to Horseshoe Curve and all of a sudden the radio's dead.
Yeah, but definitely keep that in mind. This is another purpose
Yeah.
for scanners. Let's continue on to the next slide. I know Chris Schultz is a huge fan of monitoring businesses
Yeah. Golf
and the
courses. Yeah.
and the other stuff. Well, there's other stuff to monitor, and usually stuff within that it's got a decent range to it,
Hmm.
like it has a repeater, or the dispatcher's transmitting off of a tower. Unlike something that's in a department store, you're not going to be able to hear it outside of the department store, or maybe you'll be able to hear it in the parking lot, but outside of that, your buddy across town's not going to be able to hear what's going on at Target or Walmart or what is it called, Old Navy.
Yeah.
So these are things that you can monitor that have a little bit of distance to it. Typically a repeater or transmitting off of a high tower. Taxis, buses, school buses.
Yeah.
I know it can be a little, you say, boy, you really want to monitor that stuff? Sometimes it can be interesting. As a kid growing up with a scanner, I knew when school was canceled due to a snowstorm before they
Hmm.
announced it on TV. If I didn't hear the bus drivers talking on the radio at 5:30 in the morning, I had a good
Yep.
clue that either school was going to be delayed or canceled.
Yeah.
Um,
And some of the stuff, it sounds like it would be boring. Who wants to listen to taxi cabs and school buses and stuff? But you start listening to it, it can get pretty interesting. First off, they don't have a lot of radio discipline like we're used to listening to at the police department. So it can get pretty entertaining just for that aspect of it. But the rest of it is, it can be pretty interesting, especially if you get involved with something that's ongoing.
yeah, well, I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, and there was a company called Superior Cab. And it was, a local taxi company. And a lot of times I would hear some interesting communications. As Rich said, they're not as disciplined on the radio. They'll talk about, oh, you got to go pick up Fred again. He's over at the bar drunk.
Yep.
So, I mean, you'll get to know kind of the interesting thing. Sometimes the dispatch will be talking to the cab driver, talking about gossiping about something else. They forget that there's an audience outside of the people using the radios.
Yep.
So that always makes for interesting stuff. I mean, of course, you'll hear, the police department requesting a cab for somebody. And then the next thing you do is you hear the cab channel. Yeah, the police department just called. You got to go pick up blah, blah, blah. They're
Hmm.
intoxicated or whatever it may be. but yeah, interesting conversations. Always,
Yeah.
always
And especially during
lively.
a traffic incident where there's like you say the snowstorms and such, a lot of times, the taxis and the buses, the highway department, they're out there dealing with that stuff. You get a lot more information there than you would by listening to the police or the fire department.
The other thing too is you may actually hear some traffic stuff that's going on, where a road closure or something that's going on. Where you could hear a bus driver communicating over the radio. They got, X and this street closed in between here and here because of they're repaving the
Yeah.
road. So you can
Yeah.
get some handy things like that as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of roads, we can talk about the highway departments as well. That can be some interesting conversation. And the other thing too, especially for snowstorms and weather related stuff, they're going to respond to trees down, snowstorm, plowing and all that. So highway departments can be a little bit interesting. They are a little bit more structured communication wise, but still
Yeah.
not nearly as much as police and fire. So you can get
Yeah,
some
they're a little
interesting.
less disciplined, but sometimes they're even more disciplined. It depends on where you are. Compare Chicago police to the Illinois Department of Transportation, and IDOT's a whole lot more disciplined than the Chicago police on the radio. So and then you've got the electric utilities and gas utilities. They use the radios quite a bit, especially during big storms. If you're in an area where you're prone to big thunderstorms or ice storms, especially, those guys get real busy sometimes. So make sure you have extra batteries.
Waste management. Yes, there's companies that use communication. There's a
Yeah.
company over here in Ohio called Rumpke, on
Yeah.
top of Mount Rumpke, or not too far from me. Um, I make some jokes about the landfill that keeps growing,
Okay.
but
Yeah. The nearest mountain to Cincinnati is the landfill.
yeah. So the thing with that is they're using DMR. So anytime that I want to see how DMR reception is on a particular radio, I
Yeah.
program them in. I get them really good here. And I've heard some
Mhm.
some scuttlebutt on there for certain people. Not
I'm not sure about your area, but in our area, a lot of the school buses and aggregate haulers use NXDN.
yeah. I
And
mean,
I
what
don't
depends on what they're sold, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and that just seems to be, there's several NXDN systems out here, and it's almost all school buses and rock haulers is what we call them out here.
Yeah, construction companies. That leads us right to that segue.
Yeah,
There's still some construction companies using low band. I know
yeah,
there was one of those cement companies, I think in the town that I grew up in, that used two-way radios. And
mhm,
you would hear them, communicating back, when they're returning back to the facility or communicating to each other on the road, and they would use low band because it would have great distance. So yeah, I
yeah,
mean, construction companies or even local construction companies working in a building,
yeah,
if you're in the city, it may not be repeaterized, but you'll be able to hear communication that way. And the other people that use come in mind is a lot of states have what they call flagmen.
yep,
um, and a lot, rather than using a police officer or detail officer, they'll use flagmen. And a lot of times there's some interesting conversation over
yeah,
those radio
yeah.
communications as well.
Check out that blue car. You'll like what's in there. Yeah, all that kind of there's that stuff's kind of interesting. So some towns have engineering departments, and it's usually that's a name for like their public works or their highway department or their local engineers. And they do this flood control. So flood control in a lot of areas is also a big, huge issue. So that's great listening during rainstorms.
That's for sure. I mean, certainly a lot of interesting things. I mean, a lot of people put down scanners saying about the big E word encryption. There's still a lot out there to monitor, and there's
Hmm.
still a lot of things you can bridge the gap. For instance, if a police department's gone to encryption and the fire department's in the clear, you would be amazed if you don't monitor the fire department how many things that they respond to that are incidents, that the police are on a scene
Yeah.
for. It's just amazing. We'll continue on with our slideshow presentation. This is something new that I'm trying out. Everybody's got these Bluetooth speakers.
Hmm.
There's many, many different manufacturers, brands, prices. We've got the Bose one here, which you really don't need to spend. I mean, Bose is great, but a lot of times it can be a bit pricey. So at the big online store, as many of you know it as Amazon, they have these Bluetooth transmitter receivers. Now, remember we talked about using that record jack on the back of your scanner. So let's say you've got a 15 or a 996. You can connect this up to that record jack and then transmit Bluetooth from there. And then your Bluetooth speaker acts as a receiver.
Yep.
So the reason why I'm doing this is I have an antenna on the outside of the house, which I actually improved upon since Rich was last here. So it picked up really well. So I only have it running to a one particular room. So if you want to be able to hear the scanner, let's say in your living room or in your bedroom, and you have it connected up to a real good antenna in your office, what you can do is connect up one of these and then sync up that Bluetooth speaker to this device. And then you can listen to that audio of your scanner in your office, in your bedroom, or anywhere. Or even, let's say if you want to bring the Bluetooth speaker outside to the patio, you're able to do that as well. This thing, I'm very surprised with the range. It's pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if if you have a large house or you're trying to go all the way to the edge of your property, it's probably not going to work that far. But I mean, relatively, I've tried monitoring a couple different places in the house, and it seems to cover a normal house pretty well. And the great thing about it is this acts as a transmitter. And then, of course, your Bluetooth speaker is a receiver. And the great thing about the record jack is you can plug this in the back and forget about it. It does come with a power plug. So you can plug it in so it's constantly receiving power, or you can use it. It also has a built-in battery. I basically have it plugged in all the time so the battery doesn't drain.
Yeah.
And when I'm in the room here, I can basically listen to the radio through the built-in speaker or the external. And then I just remember when I leave the room, turn down the volume. Don't turn the scanner off. And then when I go to that Bluetooth speaker, I can then turn up the volume. The one thing to keep in mind is there's a bit of latency. So you don't want to leave this scanner on in the room and then listen to it on the Bluetooth speaker. You're going to hear a little bit of latency between the two.
Yeah, a little bit of echo in there will drive you a little crazy, which is not a far trip for some of us.
Yeah, so definitely look at one of these. They're relatively expensive, inexpensive, I should say. You could probably find one for $20 or $30. There's several different brands. They basically look very similar to this.
Yeah.
This
and with
one,
that transmitter, you can also use things like AirPods or Bluetooth earphones with those as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can. There's endless uses, and with this particular device, you can sync it up to 2 devices.
Yeah,
which is great. Let's continue on. All right, so we do have a lot of agencies use a scanner as a tool. This is not something that they use as their hobby. They actually use this as a day-to-day tool to be able to perform their job. We kind of hinted it with the fire department, basically using it for a public safety PA in the fire station. So they're able to hear the activity on the radio, and then they can hear when their station gets toned out. The other thing is on a lot of police vehicles or fire vehicles to monitor other departments or neighboring departments. It's very expensive to have two-way radios in the vehicle.
Yeah,
most of them have a portable radio and the mobile radio, but if you wanted to have another mobile radio in there, it's very expensive. So a lot of times departments will say, all right, we'll spend spend the money on the mobile radio and the portable that the person has on their person, but we'll put in a scanner so they'll be able to monitor other departments. Take, for instance, if it's a police department, they may want to monitor the fire department, or they may want to monitor the highway department, or some of the neighboring police departments so they can hear what's going on in the neighboring towns. So that's a great thing. Spending $500 on a scanner versus thousands of dollars on a 2-way radio, they're able to buy more scanners in that case, versus if they put in a two-way radio to be able to monitor those other agencies, their budget's not going to go as far. News media. How do you think a lot of these television stations and radio news stations know when the big breaking incidents happen? They
Yeah.
use a scanner.
And there's a lot of stringers out there that use scanners for that purpose. Most news stations don't have their own personnel anymore, so they're using independent stringers. And those stringers are usually really good about getting whether we've got a big dust storm coming in through town now. But a lot of these news stations use stringers to get their video and their news stories, and they will provide that story to the local TV stations. I know a couple of these guys, and they're all about having the scanner so they can find the activity.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting things too with monitoring on there. I mean, even monitoring the news media is quite interesting. If they have a helicopter, just monitoring the communication in between the news desk and the helicopter, or monitoring some of the, like if the live trucks still use radios.
Right.
Of course, Los Angeles is well known for its high speed chases and such. So some interesting monitoring there as well. Going down the list and kind of staying in the news media realm, we have traffic information providers. Now, many of you probably recognize, some names called Metro or
There used to be shadow traffic.
yeah, a lot of major markets such as Boston, Los Angeles, Chicago, all those markets typically had one or two traffic information providers. So they would be traffic reporters that would be hired for the television station or the radio station to provide traffic reports. And how they get the information is basically listening to on the scanner. Typically, a lot of monitoring the state police or highway patrol. They're listening for traffic accidents when they happen, when they clear, and also hazards in the road. A lot of times, like if a mattress is on the highway and it's getting dispatched, so the state police can kind of move it off. They're going to be listening to that as well, and they'll report that on there, and they'll start to see, okay, on the really cool traffic maps, they'll be able to know why traffic is slowing down in that area because there's a mattress in the middle of the road, or someone lost their couch or sofa in the road. They'll actually kind of make their traffic report a little bit more interesting because they know they can say, well, traffic's slow in between here and here. And it could be out in the middle of nowhere, essentially.
Yeah.
It's not in the major metropolitan, approaching or leaving the city. It could be out in the middle of, Timbuktu, and they kind of know, okay, this is what's causing it.
I live out in the middle of nowhere, and our biggest issue recently has been cattle in the roadway. And every day in our local social media, we get more reports of these cattle. Be careful when you're going into town. There's cattle on their highway. So.
Yeah, definitely keep that in mind. The other thing too, which Rich has mentioned before, and he can go into a little bit more detail, is using these scanners to record audio in a, such as a squad car or something. Can you go into a little bit of detail what that's all about?
So back in the 80s, mobile vehicle vehicular recording systems became real popular in squad cars. And those were the original dash cams. And they weren't the tiny little one-piece units that you see now. It was a regular security camera wired into a big box in the trunk with a ruggedized VHS tape deck in there. And also inside that ruggedized box was typically a Bearcat 355 or 560 type scanner, one of their inexpensive analog scanners. And they use these wireless microphones. And the police officer, stuck this on his belt, stuck the microphone on his tie as a tie clip. And when you turned on the switch, it would turn on the mobile vehicle recording system, and it would record the audio onto the scanner, would go to the scanner, which would get then sent to the tape and record the camera traffic on the tape. And that's where you see the video from the DUI stops and stuff like that. And now that's evolved into small one-piece units that you can buy at Best Buy for $200. Records it all onto an SD card. It's really, they're really come, uh, you know, they've really gotten much better and a lot less expensive, and they work really well now. And it's to the point now where the police even have body cams where everything is, everything there when they're walking around, everything can be recorded. So it's come a long way, but it all started with VHS tapes and little wireless microphones. And this is one that was from one of those VRS systems, and it's on 170.445. And there were about 7 or 8 frequencies in the 169 to 172 range that were used for these. We even had it once where we had a high school play going on, and we had an officer out there to do security for the play. And he comes back to the car and he gets the notice on his vehicle recording system that tape is full. I said, "How can that happen? I just changed it, when I got on the shift that day." And so he got back, he played the tape back. The entire play was recorded. The audio of that entire play was recorded on his MVRS system because they had a wireless mic on the same frequency. And so that happens from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. I mean, just so many different things. I mean, we look at, a scanner, and most people think, monitoring police or fire. I mean, there's so many other things. The other thing that didn't make the list is they have what's called restoration companies. They're almost like modern day ambulance chasers, essentially.
Yeah.
Where they basically monitor a scanner, or they set up a system to record the radio transmissions. And let's say, it's kind of, they come out when you're at your worst. Let's say you've had a fire or flooding at your home. They will gather, information from the scanner when the fire department's been dispatched out. And then what they'll do is they'll roll on scene shortly after, providing their services.
Yeah.
So, they'll basically say, "Hey, we know that you've had an incident here. We would love to help you reconstruct, your home, or assist you with the flood damage that you've had. We have services available," which, you have to go through your insurance company and all this. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing that, they basically are heavy on monitoring fire departments. And there's, they may use something as simple as, like a Butel software, which has the Pro series where it's able to data log and then record the radio transmissions. Or they could use something like a system which is called Rangecast, which is a professional type of scanner monitoring system, where they can review audio transmissions overnight and then gather that information from there. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of businesses, such as media, traffic information providers, restoration companies, use this as a tool to be able to function as a business.
Yeah. It's kind of questionable, because they are getting you at your worst, but it's a business that there is a market for. And if it's run ethically, then, it's a good thing. But as in anything, you still have to be aware of what you're getting into.
That's for sure. So let's continue on here. I guess that wraps up the slideshow presentation. Let me go through a couple of slides, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go into your questions here in a moment. We want to make sure we remind you of, the Scanner Guys are brought to you by viewers like you. You can shop our merch store at thescannerguyshow.com. You can order products through Scanner Master using our affiliate link down in the description of this video. You can also, support us by doing either one of those things. And then always, we just want to do a quick shout out to Scanner Master for bringing you a portion of this broadcast this evening. Let's remind you, next week, Train Aficionado Live will be on, and we'll be premiering a video on August the 17th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. I actually sat down with one of the people that work for the North Carolina Transportation Museum. We had a great conversation, talked about the museum. We've talked about 611. Some of you that are fans of 611, the steam locomotive, talked about some of the big events they've had over the last several years at the North Carolina Transportation Museum. So definitely watch that. That'll be premiering a Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, August the 17th. Believe it or not, we're approaching the middle of the month already. The other thing we want to mention to you is next week, not next week, but next Scanner Guy show, we're talking about scanner programming, tips and tools. So we're going to give you some of the best tips and tools for programming your scanner. We're going to talk a little bit about software, cables, talk about some tips on programming, to get your scanner to scan relatively quickly, things to do, not to do, the benefits of doing a favorites list versus doing that zip code on that database scanner. So lots of good stuff we'll talk about. So definitely mark your calendar, set an alert on your phone. I will have an event page hopefully up shortly for this. So definitely, do the Facebook event pages. I try to do those on the Scanner Guys Facebook page. So make sure you subscribe to that. And definitely set up a reminder on that as well. Lots of great questions coming in. If you're in the LA area and you are a fan of the show Emergency, there's going to be
all are
August the 19th, 20th, and 21st at the Los Angeles County Fire Museum. I know you guys can't click the URL on the screen, but just remember lacountyfiremuseum.com. And you should be able to find this event on their website. So some good stuff there. Definitely check it out. That's August the 19th, 20th, and 21st. Check that out if you're in the area. Also, another event, if you're in the Chicago area next weekend, come out to the CARMA, Chicago Area Radio Monitoring Association meeting, August the 20th at 11 Central Time. And you'll be able to see Rich Carlson.
I'll be there.
Tell us a little bit about the restaurant and a little bit more about this event.
Yeah, so this is at Stevens Family Restaurant. It's on 63rd Street in Woodridge. It's a good food. The only thing that they ask is that if you go to the meeting, you buy your lunch. You don't have to be a member of CARMA. Just buy your lunch and have some interest in scanners. And what we normally do is we get together around 11 o'clock. The meeting itself starts about noon. We have a wireless mic, so we can pass that around. So bring your portable scanner so you can listen to the wireless mic. And we will we'll talk all about scanners, and we'll pass the mic around, and we have what's called a round table where people can ask questions or, hey, I found this frequency or what have you. The food's good. The company is mediocre probably, but we always have fun. So, like I say, if you're going to be there a week from Saturday in the Chicago area, this will be worth a little bit of diversion of your time.
Yeah, definitely check that out. Looks like definitely a good event. If you're in the area, definitely do it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing to keep in mind is if you're watching us for the very first time, hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate that. Follow, like, and subscribe to our social media as well, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. At the Scanner Guys, thescannerguyshow.com. I see a lot of rail fans on here this evening. Make sure you hop over to the Train Aficionado YouTube channel as well. We'll be able to appreciate that as well as we're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers over there. We've got a lot of questions and comments. So let's take a look at some of the comments that we've got listed here this evening.
Well, we got the first one is from our buddy over at the Scanner School. So he's checking in and saying hi and howdy.
Hey, Phil, I hope everything's going well. I know we haven't emailed you in some time and just been crazy busy with doing 2 different shows each and every week in between the Scanner Guys on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of every month, and then the Train Aficionado show the 1st and 3rd I've been producing a little bit more content. We've been doing double features, which is something new to the two channels, where we're giving you a video premiere, and then we did a series on software where we premiered the video of the software, and then we did the talk about the software, like a live Q&A. So we're trying to offer a little bit more on the channel. I know you've been doing a lot over there at the Scanner School, so definitely check out the Scanner School. Some really great podcasts over there. You can download those podcasts on pretty much any podcast application that's out there, and there's tons of them. So just search out the Scanner School.
All right. So Dave in Temecula, I think that's how you pronounce that.
Yes,
California, Temecula. Yep. Back in the day, and when he was in the fire department, they would use a scanner to crosstalk with other agencies. So I know in Illinois, the state police used to do that down in the southern part of the state. They would have they would talk on their car-to-car channel, 42.5, and the sheriff's department would talk back on their channel, and they would have a scanner. The state police would have a scanner on the sheriff's channel, and the sheriff would have a scanner on the state police channel, and that way they could talk back and forth. They're only talking on their licensed frequency, but they're receiving the other guy, and they're able to communicate back and forth. So not only do they just use it to monitor the neighboring agencies, but they can also use them to talk to the neighboring agencies.
I have an interesting story regarding that. When I used to work, I worked in Boston as a traffic information manager, providing traffic report content to like radio stations like WBZ, WRKO, and some of the major television stations in Boston. I had a mobile unit that actually was good friends with a state police trooper. And this was at the point when they weren't using low band that often in the metro Boston area. So the state trooper would communicate on one frequency, one of those low band frequencies. And then he had, of course, that frequency programmed in his radio. And then the state trooper had a frequency that he was licensed on, programmed in, and they could talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like if he was patrolling his neighborhood or his area of the interstate, they would, oftentimes check in with each other and being on their own frequency without violating any rules.
Yeah.
They were able to communicate. And of course, the low band for the most part is something now for the state of Massachusetts. It's kind of like a talk around channel for the most part.
Yeah.
Because the 800 megahertz trunking system, is the big thing.
Yeah. Let's see here. So IB Traveler got his hand license yesterday. Congratulations, Jonathan. One of these days, you're meant to do it.
Unfortunately, I've got so much going on in between producing so much content in between the two channels and everything. I just I really haven't taken a vacation in years at this point. I'm taking some time off at the end of this month, which is great. So looking forward to that. But
it stinks having a life, doesn't it?
Huh?
Kind of stinks having a life that you have to deal with once in a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, working full time plus doing two different YouTube channels and maintaining a little bit of a Scanner Master's social media. So definitely
and your own personal life.
Yeah.
All right, so Joe's got a 996 P2, and he's seeing a round-shaped square on some of the scanner features. Not sure what that means. So if you are seeing a diamond with a C in it, that's your close call. If you press the big silver knob, you'll see a little F in a rectangular block on the upper left corner. But there's some other icons. If you go to the scanner manual, what's the scanner manual page?
Markscanners.com. Scanners.
Markscanners.com. He has a great representation of the various screens and all of the icons that you would see on the screen of your scanner. You go to that web page and look for that page on there that has all the icons and compare that to what you're seeing on your scanner, and that'll tell you what that means. But there are several different features that will pop an icon up on your screen.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely Mark Scanners. Bookmark that.
Yeah,
Scanner Master actually carries hard copy books of it, and a lot of people say, "Why do I need a hard copy of book? I can look at it for free." Some people actually prefer an actual book
yeah,
to hold in
absolutely.
their hands, so that's something that we have available there. But Mark Scanners is definitely a good source, and a lot of times he'll have a section of the site or a page in the book where it kind of goes over all those icons that you see on the screen. Yeah, of course, there's quite a few icons on that screen, so you want to kind of get familiar with it, and you're wondering why you're getting the local radio station, FM radio station on your scanner. Could be because you have close call on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this guy's he's just down the road from the first student bus services, but you can't hear on anything on that particular frequency for a student. Now, if you're listening to a school bus company on that frequency, look two places where you can look to see if they've on the DMR or NXDN or some other digital mode. Is first off, you want to check radio reference, and that should tell you what they're using as long as somebody's provided the information. And if you can't find it there, look up their license on the FCC website. And when you find their license on the FCC website, there's a little button in the upper uh, corner of the screen. I forget if it's left or right, and it says emission. And you click on that emission, and it'll tell you what the emission codes. And then when you find the emission codes, and it's going to be something like 11KF311E or something like that. Just copy that and just do a Google search on it, and that'll tell you what the emission code is. It'll tell you that it's narrowband FM or it's NXDN or it's P25 or it's DMR. And that's a good way to tell what they're going to be using there.
Couple other tips for monitoring school bus companies. For years, when I was living in Middleborough, the same company basically won the contract for providing the bus transportation for the town. So the frequencies stood the same, over those years. And then after a while, they were starting to get some competitive bids from like First Student. And they lost the contract, and then First Student took it over. I noticed with First Student, you have to be careful with them because sometimes they will change the radio frequencies very easily because one, they have a whole bunch of frequencies licensed across the country, and it may say 151.775 is the local channel, and it may be something different.
Yeah.
The best thing that I recommend is monitoring or at least searching out the frequencies on the first day of school. So if you're able to set up a service search on your scanner, you look at some of the school buses, you're able to kind of determine, well, that looks like a VHF or a UHF antenna, and try to search out some of the frequencies that are licensed to them. Do a band search. I mean, if they've got mostly VHF frequencies licensed, do a search of that band, a whole bunch of those frequencies. A lot of times they may be using a frequency that they're not licensed in that town, but they do carry a license under
Someplace
First
else, yeah.
Student.
And the other thing, put that frequency into your analog scanner and see if you hear some digital noise. And if you hear some digital noise, that's a good indication that they have gone DMR or perhaps NXDN.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as it used to be called Warrentown Transportation, when they lost that contract, it then ended up being First Student, and then First Student. 1 year they'd be on this frequency, the next year they were on a different frequency, so it was constantly changing. I'm not too sure why. They were probably moving equipment from one location to another, and they weren't swapping out the radios. So definitely keep that in mind. um when doing that. First day of school is the best day to do that. If
Yeah.
you're able to do some searches first thing in the morning, there'll be tons of radio transmissions, kids on the wrong bus, the new drivers. It's just going to be tons of communication, so definitely keep that in mind.
So,
Robert mentioned security companies. Yeah,
okay.
that's
Yeah.
another thing that you can monitor as well.
Yeah.
What else is here?
We were talking about the DMR and NXDN. Yeah, NXDN does work on conventional frequencies or it can be trunked. Same thing with DMR and the same thing with P25. All those digital modes can be conventional or trunked. About the only digital mode that's kind of common out there that you won't normally see in a conventional radio, which means non-trunked, is EDAX Pro Voice. I don't think there's any Pro Voice out there that is not trunked, at least nothing that I've ever come across. But all the other digital modes that are common out there, NXDN, P25, DMR, those are all work on both conventional and trunking. Now, there's a neat thing to do with, especially with NXDN and P25 conventional. If you program those as a single channel trunked system, they will often show the radio IDs that they're using on there. Even though it's a conventional system, they use some trunking features, and it includes radio IDs, which is a great tool to use. You can kind of help identify the individual things out there. So that's a hint for digital use.
That's for sure.
All righty. So our buddy Chris says he's heard flagman on GMRS radios. GMRS, FRS, and MERS channels are real popular with flagman.
Yeah, I've heard that too. And there was a work crew that was in front of the house one time, and I was listening to it while I was working, and there was some interesting conversation. You know, you had different flagmen each day, and they were one guy was complaining about the other flagman, and then there was another person that was on the channel that wasn't doing it, but that person was bossing the other people around.
Yeah.
It just was, I couldn't get over how much drama there was for flagmen. But
yeah. And we have a thing out here called pilot cars for a lot of the construction areas where it's a real long extended construction area with curves or up and down the mountains. And so you have pilot cars, and that adds a whole nother set of communications to the mix. Because you have a pilot car in the front and in the rear, and it'll escort all the cars through the construction zone. And there's a lot of chatter back and forth, and sometimes it can be pretty entertaining. So can someone who's feeding Broadcastify using unencrypted frequencies such as a business? So he was thinking about putting UPS, the UPS United Parcel Service, I presume, on the web, so that people can get a good laugh. So if you go to broadcastify.com, it'll tell you what you can and can't put up on as a stream.
Yeah, I'm not certain of any businesses. I know it's typically, the key things: public safety, aviation, maritime, railroads, those things, ham radio, weather radio. I'm not too sure about businesses.
Yeah,
there's also restrictions on what you can do public safety wise.
Yeah,
you can't do tactical channels. You can't do, secondary or other channels that are sensitive, such as narcotics or the drug team or the SWAT team. It's basically your everyday, dispatch. Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't seen any businesses. You would have to look on Broadcastify and look.
Absolutely. All right. So Bear Bull wants to know what he needs to monitor NXDN.
You're going to need, if it's trunking, you're going to need a unit in radio and need to do the upgrade.
Now, if it's conventional, you can get away with a TRX 1 or 2, but if it's trunking, you're best off with the unit.
Yeah, and that's and it's basically programmed in as a, no different than a digital system. It has a little bit different instructions to it slightly, but if you're using software, it'll walk you right through it, especially if it's listed on Radio Reference.
Yeah, and then you can just import it right into the radio if you're using the proper software. And when you program in any digital trunking system, when you create the trunking system, either on the front panel of the radio or with the software, the first thing it's going to ask you is what type of trunking system it is. And you select NXDN in this particular purpose. If it's NXDN conventional, all you got to do is program that as a conventional channel and set it up either as NXDN only or digital only, or if you leave it open, it'll receive it both in analog mode and NXDN mode, in case there are users using both modes on that scanner. What about the software package for live ATC? How hard is that to install? I've never done it. I don't know. I don't think you've done it, but it shouldn't be that hard. It's probably very similar to, if not the same software that Broadcastify uses. It's the same concept, except live ATC. Basically, what that is recording air traffic control and, again, sharing it on the web, just like Broadcastify does with other stuff. So I've listened to a live ATC from time to time, and there's a couple of really great YouTube channels that package live ATC with created diagrams of specific instances where there was a conflict or an argument between the controller and the airplane, or sometimes during a crash or something like that. So they use the audio they get from live ATC, and then the content creator creates the diagram, kind of looks like the radar diagram, and shows you what happened, as with the same time frame as the radio traffic. It's kind of fascinating if you're into that. So Chris would like Unit to manufacture a dedicated tone-out unit, so it doesn't type the scanner.
That'd be a Pletron pager, essentially.
You get a BCT 15X.
Yeah.
Under $200, and it's cheaper than what you would get an alert receiver for, and just dedicate that to it.
Yeah, or if you've got extra radios and you're able to dedicate it, then do that. Yeah. I mean, the thing is I've got a couple of radios here, and I'm not too, like I've dedicated one radio to be able to do the tone out. So
yeah.
I mean, definitely you can do that, or like Rich said, a 15X, which is relatively it does cost a little bit of money, but it's relatively inexpensive compared to the other counterparts that are digital.
Yeah, and you can get them used for half that price. You can get a used one for $100 or so, and it works great for fire tone out. I used to, when I was really into fire tone out, when I still lived in Illinois, I had 6 15Xs doing nothing but fire tone out, and it worked great, and it didn't cost a lot of money. Okay, so Les is telling us that there's beacons on the roof of emergency vehicles that can change the traffic lights. Yep. Those are called Opticom, and I'm sure there's other technologies out there. And there's 2 technologies that Opticom uses. One of them is a visible strobe light, and the new one now is using infrared. So you don't see that flashing strobe light on the roof of the vehicle. And depending on the technology that's used in your area, they can actually set the signals up so that they, they'll get a green light as they're approaching the intersection. Most of these systems also will have a very bright white light. It's actually called lunar, is the name of the color. It's a very bright white light on the arm at the highest point of the traffic signal, and it's either flashing or it's steady white. If it's flashing, and I forget which direction it is, one way means that the signal has been detected and you're going to either have the green or get the green. And the other one is that the Opticom is detected from the other direction, so that if you're approaching that intersection, there's an emergency vehicle going on the cross direction. So, and like I say, they use either visible white strobe lights or non-visible infrared lights.
Yeah, the programmer that works at Scanner Master actually gave me an interesting story one of the times I was talking to him. He works as a fireman in Attleboro and Massachusetts, and he responded to an accident scene in North Attleboro, which is the neighboring town, and they do have that technology on the rigs. So they, of course, were getting green lights the whole way because they had that technology turned on as they approached the light. When they reached the scene of the accident, they forgot to turn it off.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was the light the road they were sitting on was constantly green, and the cross street was red, to the point where one of the police officers figured out who's got it on. They got to turn it off because they're backing up all the cross street traffic.
Yeah, that happens from time to time. We had that happen once when I first got on the job, and this is dating me, in the late 70s. The older technology, if you had a bright spotlight on your car, you could flick the signals with the spotlight on your car as well. So, yeah, those Opticons are a lot of fun, but they can also cause problems every once in a while. All right, so I'm not quite sure I understand what the situation is here. He puts close call in on his SDS 100. He's getting a strong hit from one of the local radio stations, but it's not tripping the close call. Well, then I don't know how you know that you're doing it. The only thing I can think of is that the frequency is coming up, but you're not hearing the audio. And if that's the case, it might be setting it up in narrowband FM instead of wideband FM, because broadcast stations are FMB on the scanner, and two-way voice communications are FMN. And if your radio is tuned to FNN, it might not hear the audio on FMB, which is a wider signal. So there's two things you can do. If you see that and you want to listen to it, you can just hit the hold button or the channel button, depending on which scanner you've got, and type in the FM broadcast frequency, 99.1, and then hit that hold or channel button again, and you can hear the FM station, and it should bring it to the proper mode. And the other thing you can do too is if you want to avoid having those stations trip your close call, you can use a thing called broadcast screen, and it's in the close call options, and you can turn on broadcast screen for FM broadcast, and it will prevent your scanner from getting a close call hit on an FM radio station. All right, so Kevin's got a Radio Oddity GM30. So I'm guessing that's a GMRS radio. He can hear people talking, but he can't talk to them. So if you're licensed on GMRS and you have permission to use that particular repeater, check with the repeater owner to get the proper input codes to activate that repeater. And once they provide that to you, you'll have to program that into your radio to make sure you have that. Because repeaters will have two sets of tones. One tone will be for the output, and the other tone will be for the input, and they're not always the same. Some are, some aren't. So just because you can detect a tone on the output doesn't mean that's the input tone. But make sure that, number one, you have a license to use GMRS, and number two, you have permission from the repeater owner, because you need both in order to legally use that GMRS repeater.
Rich, I didn't get a chance to work on this slide.
Oh, sure.
But can you tell us a little bit about this device here?
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about fire alert monitors. There's a couple companies that make fire alert monitors now that Pletron is gone. Vitronics used to be one of them. I think they're gone nowadays too. But the Vitronics fire alert receiver, and we actually had a couple of these in our firehouses, were basically a Bearcat 355 scanner, and they would take the front panel off the radio and replace it with their own that has a volume and squelch control and a couple other controls. And then they added the tone alert module inside the radio. And then they sell that for X amount of dollars as a tone alert receiver. If you want to buy the programming kit, because most of the time these would be programmed by the dealer that you bought it from. But if you wanted to buy the programming kit so you can make changes yourself to change, let's say your fire frequency changed from one to another, you could buy the programming kit. And the programming kit was the faceplate that they took off the radio in the first place. And you would plug that ribbon cable into the connector inside the radio, use the original front panel of the radio to program it, and then you disconnect it and off you go. So they're getting money from you two different ways. They're taking parts off the radio, and then they're selling you the parts that they took off the radio, which I always thought was kind of a neat thing. But these actually worked very well. We had two of these in our firehouse, one for our channel, one for the neighboring town's channel. And then we bought a third one for the mutual aid channel after the original Pletron finally bit the dust that we had on that. And they were wired into our PA system. And you can get them with an optional relay output so that you can use that relay to turn on the station lights when the alert receiver goes off. And that worked really well. Eventually, we put one in a 911 center so that we could hear the fire dispatches going out when fire dispatch moved to a different location. So they're a nice, tiny little radio. They weren't particularly expensive. They were more expensive than a scanner, but for what they were not a bad price.
All right.
All righty. So let's see here. The next gen radio system that the school buses are on in the, I'm assuming the Marion area, are they encrypted, or you have a special license to listen? So you don't need a license to listen to anything, but if they are encrypted, then you're not going to be able to hear them, and they're not going to give you the encryption codes in order to do so. They might be digital, but digital doesn't mean they're encrypted. So again, check radio reference and see what they say there. And if it shows that they're encrypted, then you're not going to be able to listen to them unless you get a radio from the school bus company. And if you don't work for them, the chances are they're not going to give you one of their radios.
No. Yes, Watson made an appearance. Actually, last month he celebrated his 9th birthday. So happy birthday to Watson. I think we had a pre-produced train aficionado show that evening. It was on a Wednesday night, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Did you give him a cake?
No, he got a special bone that had his name on it. So.
Oh, cool.
And then, of course, he had some milk bones that were here in the office, some large milk bones. And one morning he decided to open the box and pull out a few on his own. So, yeah.
He's smarter than you think, huh?
Oh, yeah, he's really smart.
Yeah. He's a good guy. I enjoyed enjoyed meeting him the other couple months ago.
Yeah. So Todd's got an interesting thing. He actually donated a pretty cool radio to his mom, and that's another thing that we can recommend. Older radios. You may have a fan that's interested into trains or aviation, and you're not.
Sure.
You may have a low end radio that you're no longer using. Why not? Share the wealth and give them a tool that they can use trackside or at the airport to be able to monitor stuff.
Yeah. And the HT600s back in their day, they were relatively simple radios, but they were rugged as heck. You can, the fire department used them as tire caulks once in a while, block the tires from rolling when they set up the ladder truck there is so tough. I love the HT600. And you could program those as an alert receiver back before Uniden came up with those scanners. Okay, so Jay has got 172.5 conventional. It shows talking, but it doesn't hear anything. He wonders why. A couple things. 172.5 is, chances are it's a federal frequency, so chances are they're using P25. So if you have it set as analog only, or you set it for like PL search, that would force it into analog only. Take it out of that mode so that you're able to hear P25. And otherwise, if you've programmed it with a PL tone or a DPL code or a NAT code, and that code is incorrect or the wrong mode, of course, you're not going to hear it that way either. So, when you program that frequency in, don't program in a mode or a privacy code. And if it is digital, assuming you have a digital scanner, if it is digital, it should show up. And then if you've got like a 536 or an SDS type scanner, it should automatically show you what the NAT code is. And that way you'll know it's P25. So can the dispatchers change the lights also from their office? I'm assuming this goes back to our discussion of the Opticom systems that change the traffic lights. Some fire departments where the dispatcher is in the fire station, they occasionally would have the ability to press a button on their console to change the traffic signal out in front of the fire station. We had that at our police dispatch center, which was next to the fire department. And when we dispatched the fire department, we could hit the button as they were pulling out, and that would turn the traffic signal in front of the public safety building green for the firehouse and red for the road. So some places they can do that, but they will normally only do that in a controlled situation when the dispatcher is right there. It can actually see the traffic. Topic suggestion: rail fanning on YouTube.
There are a number of people that post videos. You can see trains from across the country on a regular basis. None of them are as good as Distant Signal. Um, there are some YouTube channels that are really good, like Distant Signal. They just don't have the popularity. Basically, Danny Harmon is very lucky. He's grown an audience relatively quickly over the past several years. And then you, of course, have, I'm going to leave them nameless, but you got some people that are, more entertainment value than actual rail fanning. The video quality may not be as good. The content, may be funny, but it's just not, like good quality content. We've had Danny Harmon on, phenomenal guy. He does a lot of work. He has a broadcast background, just like I do. But he's spent a little bit more time in broadcast than I did. But yeah, he's got overall really good channel. There's a lot I want to do with Train Aficionado. That's why I'm trying to grow the channel. So eventually, I'm able to do more. With us being able to do like a large channel like Danny Harmon's channel with Distant Signal, you can modernize the channel, and then you can actually have a revenue stream with that channel. When you have, like 100,000 people watching your videos, it'll create a revenue stream for you, which then you can in turn, you can buy possibly a drone, or be able to use some of that money generated to be able to travel to places, to be able to do additional content.
Yeah. And if you make enough money on it, you can make it your job versus,
Yeah. That's the thing that that I'm trying to build. Of course, the scanner guys have grown quite a bit over the last several years. We started the broadcast in 2019, and we've grown to almost 5,000 subscribers, and we continue to grow each and every month, which is great. But we hope to grow it even more, so we're able to bring you more content, be able to kind of bring more things in. We're not making really a lot of money off the channel whatsoever. It is modernized, but not to the degree of making hundreds of dollars a month.
Yeah.
I've been able to upgrade things, in between, giving a little bit, kind of pulling the curtain back, giving you some insight of what we've been able to do over the last several years with either, the things by supporting the channel, by doing the t-shirts or hoodies, or, just being able to watch the channel, has allowed us to be able to upgrade equipment such as the Stream Deck that I have here right in front of me, or, upgrading a microphone, or even another thing is purchasing a Windows-based laptop, an inexpensive Windows-based laptop. I just purchased one a couple months ago, and that gives us the ability to show off the software, since I'm running all Mac here. And of course, excuse me, Mac is not scanner friendly when it comes to programming software, unless you're using Parallels or something like that. But yeah, I think there's more channels out there such as Distant Signal. They just don't come up in the search engine as high up as a more popular channel. I've seen some really good documentary videos that are out there, that people have taken a subject regarding rail fanning and did a really good job with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good high quality ones. That one, and I'm trying to remember, a Delay and Block. They do some really good high quality rail fanning videos, and there are several of them out there. Like you say, you have there's a balance between entertainment value and content, and some channels have both. Some have one or the other. So it depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly, support those channels. I mean, as we can't stress enough, um, by subscribing to the channel, it's a huge help.
Yeah.
With the scanner guys, we recommend, using our affiliate link for Scanner Master. Granted, it's a couple dollars on an order, but a couple dollars add up here and there. The other thing with purchasing our swag, t-shirts and sweatshirts and all that, that helps the channel as well. For the most part, many of you know that Scanner Master, is a sponsor on here occasionally. They don't cover all the content and all the labor that's involved in this. I mean, each and every week, whether it's on Train Aficionado or the Scanner guys, it's certainly a labor. Putting together the slideshows, promoting the shows, trying to figure out content each and every week. It's not the easiest thing, especially where it's a niche hobby and we got to try to keep it interesting each and every week. It can be a challenge. I mean, we're the only ones.
You got to balance life and work and hobby. So,
and we're the only ones that are doing this live for the most part. I mean, so it can be a little bit challenging, being able to do a live Q&A, when we're trying to share a screen of on a computer. Anything can go wrong with technology, and even, with us talking here, we could, we could slip up by accident and say the wrong thing or, be put on the spot and we think we have the answer to your question 100% certain, but we may be slightly off on it. I mean, when you're doing a live show, it's you're put on the spot. But we do appreciate every one of you watching the program each and every week. And I can't stress enough, go over to Train Aficionado, subscribe to the channel, help us grow that channel. So, one day, that channel can be just as popular as Distant Signal or Delay and Block. The same thing with the Scanner guys. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that don't realize we're here. So you subscribing to the channel helps it grow. It helps it go on people's feeds for them to be able to see that on their feed.
All right. So Bob writes, have you ever done a deep dive on a 325 P2?
We have. We have done some deep dives on all of the radios. I believe we did a whole series of them, but I'm trying to remember. I believe it could have been roped in. The 325 P2 could have been roped in with the 996 P2, which was probably a dual show. Those radios share so much, other than, one's a portable and one's a base mobile. I mean, basically they're the same radio. It's just form factor for the most part, and maybe slightly differences with its outer, one being able to run on batteries and a small form factor. They're pretty much the same radio for the most part. But we have done several of those deep dive shows. We're always open to show suggestions. There is, we think that we've done it all. And if you guys want to see something, different or you want to see a new show and we could try to put a new spin on it. Yeah. Suggestions, we're open to it.
Absolutely. All right. So Carmen bought a Pro 35 at the local Goodwill store. It's a rebadged Bearcat 100 XLT. Was there a Radio Shack branded 200 XLT? I don't recall that. I recall the Pro 35, and you're right. It was basically a 100 XLT, which was also sold as a Regency scanner after Uniden bought Regency.
Now, if I remember correctly, that was the radio with a slide-on battery.
Yeah,
is that right?
Slid in on, it was a conventional only scanner, kind of big.
Yeah, I remember the slide-on battery when I first started at Scanner Master in 2008 or 7. Oh, my word, it's been a long time. I remember that we sold that battery for a number of years until we couldn't get it anymore. That's the thing that it pops out, that BC 100. I remember that from that. Of course, we didn't sell it at that point, but we sold the battery. Yeah.
Yeah, those are great radios. They were really sensitive. I used to listen to low band skip on those all the time. I had both the 100 and the 200. I didn't have the Radio Shack version up, but I'd seen them. And those slide-on batteries were, you either loved them or you hated them. There was no in between. And there was a couple companies that would make the desk chargers for them that could stick in there. Um, and then there were another companies that would make aftermarket batteries. And if you've got one of those radios now, about the only thing you can do is rebuild that battery pack, because as far as I know, nobody makes the batteries for those anymore anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where Scanner Master was sourcing them. I mean, we kept buying those and buying those and buying those until we couldn't get any more. The same
Yeah.
thing with um the portable digital scanner that had that cluster of the 4 battery pack together. It was a 200 something BCD
Oh,
296.
you found the 235 with the little battery pack that went in the back and it had a
Yeah,
little
and it
wire
was
connection?
yellow.
Yeah, the
The pack
235 and the
was
245 had that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I couldn't remember the model number. I mean, it's
yeah,
been so long since those radios were out.
yeah. Question about your how do you like the shelves in back here? Looks great.
The shelves back of me is actually from IKEA.
Okay.
They're USB lights, and you basically, I'm not gonna do it because it's a little bit away from me, but you tap it and it'll turn it on or off.
Yeah.
So I put a couple on the shelf so I can kind of feature, some of the radios I have. My old 780, which I love. I got a 15, and I've got my only ICOM radio, which is the IC20. And then, of course, I have an SDS. And then one of my first radios that I beta tested for Uniden, the Home Patrol 1, which, I was quite proud to
Yeah.
be able to be a part of that beta testing. And I'm hoping to continue doing beta testing in the future, because, I mean, it's certainly the one. I wouldn't have half the radios that I have today if it wasn't for beta testing for Uniden. And two, it keeps me involved in the hobby
Yeah.
in that aspect. Being able to suggest and help, mold the scanner future for every one of you out there.
Got a show idea. How about e-skip and how it works? So now in the cycle, the skip cycle the solar cycle starting to work its way back up a little bit. I was reading that 10 meters is kind of popping up once in a while. So if you're a ham, you might want to start listening to 10 meters or 6 meters. But yeah, if that cycle gets going up and we get some more low band skip out there, that would be a great show topic.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Skip. I just don't know enough about it. I've done a lot of
Yeah.
DXing for FM and AM radio. Um, but yeah, I mean, that certainly would be an interesting topic.
Batteries plus. I was about to mention this. We kind of got off the topic a little bit, but yeah, batteries plus you can bring a battery in battery plus and they can rebuild it. They'll take it apart and replace the cells, replace the thermistor, which keeps the battery from overheating, and then glue it back together. And I've had them back with my 100 XLT batteries. They did a couple of those, and they did the 245. So they do a great job with those. So, and there may be other companies as well. So. Todd, I haven't heard any 6 meter skip. I did hear some low band skip last week on 33 and 39 megs, but I haven't heard anything on 6 meters recently. But Radios 80 said check very early in the mornings. That's the best time for low band skip, especially on 6 meters. Usually the late afternoons tend to be better for for some skip, and other skip is early in the morning. But summertime is usually the best time for skip as well. So next summer should be even better than this year.
if you're into DXing, FM DXing, I used to during the summer. Um, Growing up, I would listen in the car, on Sunday mornings. I grew up and I didn't have a washer and dryer at home, so I had to go to the laundromat. So usually my mom and I would go to the laundromat early on Sunday mornings. And when I was able to drive, I would take my car over and we'd bring our laundry over to the laundromat and do our laundry. I'd run out to the car, and typically it was like 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 or 8 on a Sunday morning. And that was great for FMDXing. Being in Massachusetts, I used to hear way out in Connecticut, an FM station, WTIC, I think. And then, of course, WHOM on Mount Washington would boom in as well. So there was a lot of stations that I would go up the dial. I know that they were strong signals and say, well, let's see if I can get it today. And
Yeah.
usually, like you said, Rich, during those summer, that summer heat, you would get some really good skip even on the FM dial as well.
I've been playing more and more on HF recently, 20 meters and 40 meters. So as those bands start going up, I'll have to start listening to 10 and 6. So my problem is I'm kind of hamstrung with my antennas. I can only have antennas in the attic. So I'm not going to be able to do a whole lot. I did talk to a guy in Texas last week. So not bad for 10 watts.
Yeah.
On an attic antenna. So
yeah, I mean, especially the distance, where you are in Arizona and Texas, it's pretty. I mean, just with that, your list, with your conditions there, with being in an HOA, you're, like you said, you're limited.
Yeah,
I mean that's pretty superb if you think about it.
Yeah, and I was very impressed with that. So was he. He was using 10 watts as well. So we had PRP in both directions. So, and when I lived in the Chicago area, where I worked was right on Lake Michigan, at the south end of Lake Michigan. And so when VHF high band would pop up, usually on summer evenings, just after it got dark, and you'd start hearing things from Iowa and Michigan and Ohio and Minnesota on high band from the Chicago area. And so we'd hook up we had an ICOM R7000. We hooked up to a antenna at the top of a 100-foot tower, and we were picking up stuff from all over the place. It was great. And Taylor, I had a ICOM 705, and I've got a 7300 coming soon. So
the other
705 is a great radio.
The other cool thing that you can keep in mind, for some quick DXing, WBZ AM in Boston can be heard across a whole bunch of states in the overnight hours. So if you find yourself, late in the evening driving somewhere home, try 1030 on your AM dial, and you may be able to hear WBZ. 1010 Winds in New York is another station. There's several out there that are AM stations. They have what they call clear channel licenses.
Yeah.
Basically, they don't reduce down their power at night, because AM signals will go a lot further at night because of the atmosphere. So a lot of stations, AM stations, have to reduce down power during the overnight hours. But there's some stations, such as WBZ, have that clear channel license. WGN 720, a clear channel license, 50,000 watts on a good night, can be heard all the way out in San Francisco. So there's several of those stations out there. I mean, it's interesting. As a kid, I've always been interested in two-way radios and FM and AM broadcasts and all that. So I've always had this, this bug right from the beginning.
Yeah, I grew up doing AM DXing as a kid. When I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, I had a big Sony shortwave AM radio that worked really well, and I got all 50 states and all 10 provinces within a year with that thing. So, And there's, like I say, Clear Channel is not what Carmen says it's kind of an oxymoron now, because they've added more and more nighttime stations on what used to be Clear Channel stations. So you're still going to get these stations at a longer distance, but now that there's more co-channel stations on there at night, you're not going to be getting them quite as far as you used to.
The other thing to keep in mind, if you're interested in FM and AM DXing, C Crane is a company that you can check out. They've got some pretty decent receivers that you can use for kind of DXing as well. So it's another cool thing.
Yeah.
But definitely, definitely another portion of the hobby to check out. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So, well, I think that's where we're at, my friend.
All right, let's kind of remind you guys of what's coming up. So next week, we're premiering a video. I've sat down and interviewed a gentleman that's over at Marcus, which is over at the North Carolina Transportation Museum. He actually had a slideshow presentation to share with us. So he kind of gives us a behind-the-scenes look at the museum. Of course, it was famous for the big event that Norfolk Southern had all their heritage units there around the roundhouse. You see that all over social media, that photo popping up. So he talks about that event. It was probably one of the hottest days. And it was one of the events that they kind of put together relatively quickly. It wasn't something they had a lot of time to put together. He talks about that in detail in the interview. Really good. So definitely tune in Wednesday, August the 17th. If you're interested in trains or somewhat interested, I'm sure you'll be fascinated with this interview. 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. It'll be premiering August the 17th. And of course, after it premieres, you're able to watch it anytime on our YouTube channel. So make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to the Train Aficionado YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Train Aficionado. Make sure you check out the blog. We got some good stuff there as well. Coming up, the next Scanner Guys show, we are talking about programming your scanner, tips and tools and tricks and so much more. We're going to be talking about, what things to do. Keep in mind, things to make your scanner scan faster, maybe some software tips. Things to do with being able to do a favorites list versus a zip code. There's lots of benefits to doing a favorites list. So make sure you check out the show. It'll be next Wednesday, August the 24th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. So it'll be not next Wednesday, the following Wednesday. If you are on, you've got Roku or Apple TV, download the YouTube app. You'll be able to watch us on the big screen as well. Also, in the LA area, and you love the show Emergency, this looks like a great activity. Coming up August the 19th, 20th, and 21st at the Los Angeles County Fire Museum. They're celebrating Emergency. So definitely check that out if you're in the local area. Visit the website, lacountyfiremuseum.com for more details. So some cool stuff there. And then Rich Carlson will be making an appearance out in Arizona. Not in Arizona. He's already in Arizona. He'll be making an appearance out in Illinois for the CARMA meeting, the Chicago Area Radio Monitoring Association. They're having their meeting August the 20th. That's a Saturday. So pencil that in, 11 a.m. Central Time. And Rich, tell us a little bit more about this event one more time for those that missed it. And
this is the CARMA meeting. We used to have them every other month, but with the internet and everything else like that, we only have them now a couple times a year. And we scheduled this one around my trip to Chicago, which I'm going to be out there for a couple of weeks. And so this is going to be a regular CARMA type meeting. And we typically have about an hour or so where we socialize at, between like 11 and noon. And then about noon, we start the actual meeting itself. There'll be about 5 minutes worth of administrative stuff from the moderator, which is my buddy Will. And then we go right into what we call the round table. And that's where we pass the wireless mic around. And if you've got questions or new frequencies or, hey, I heard this, or hey, I've got this new thing to show, whatever you want, everybody will get a chance to say their piece. We may have a presentation as well. And if you've got something that you want to sell, some scanners or something you want to sell or give away, feel free to bring those with you as well. The only thing we ask is that you buy your lunch. We want to keep the restaurant happy because we like those guys and we want to be able to go there again in the future. So buy your lunch and enjoy yourself and have fun. And Will's he's watching. He's got speakers. So we're doing that. And bring your handheld scanner and tune it to 171.045 because that'll be our wireless mic frequency.
Awesome. All right. And let's see here. So we don't want to forget to follow and like and subscribe to the Scanner Guys social media as well. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at the Scanner Guys. Make sure you check out the website, thescannerguyshow.com. If you haven't already, pick up your Scanner Guy swag. We got some t-shirts, some hoodies there. We've got our Dayton 2022 t-shirts, limited edition, still available there at a great price. So definitely pick up your Scanner Guys merch, and that will help us to continue growing the channel and being able to improve the quality of the programming. So definitely do that. Make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to our social media as well. I think that's going to about wrap it up for us. We went a little bit over time. We try to keep these shows within an hour to an hour 15 minutes to an hour 30. We went over a little bit, but definitely we appreciate you watching each and every week. We'll be back with the Scanner Guys in a couple of weeks with the software program. So definitely tune in. Chris, it's a one-man show pretty much over here on this side, so I haven't had any updates on the hats. I mean, we finally got the Train Aficionado hats situated. The Scanner Guys hats will be something that we'll have to look into at some point. I just, unfortunately, I'm kind of stretched a bit.
Yeah, we're burning the candle at both ends and sometimes in the middle as well.
Yeah. So appreciate everybody watching. I guess we'll wrap it up for this evening. Be safe out there. Make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to both the Train Aficionado and the Scanner Guys. We appreciate it. Have a great night. I'm Jonathan Higgins.
I'm Rich Carlson.
See you next time.
Bye, guys.